Welcome back. So let's get into our panel discussion. Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi says preparations are in full swing for the upcoming G20 Leaders Summit. Presidents from the grouping are expected to descend on Johannesburg in November. Now, Lesufi says he has met with International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola to give an update on the work done to address service delivery problems. So the platform is yours too. Do you think that the province is ready to host the big gathering in November? Join the conversation via WhatsApp. The number is 072-110-5584 or give us a call on 010-594-6010. Joining us is Joburg CAN manager Julia Fish in studio to speak to us about whether or not there is confidence in Gauteng being able to host the G20 Summit. We're also joined by Business Unity South Africa's CEO, Mr. Kulegane Mate, and governance expert, Professor Theo Venter. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. A good evening to you. Julia, you're in studio. I'll start with you. We just had a conversation with our reporter, Junior Kumalo, and he talks about an oversight visit that took place today that focused specifically on the finances of the various municipalities, and not a lot of confidence that is being seen there when we talk about just how badly many of our municipalities are looking financially. Then there's the issue of what our infrastructure actually looks like. So just at face value, before we actually start to unpack what we need to fix in the next 100 or so days, which is obviously going to be a lot. But face value, is there confidence that we can do this comfortably and proudly as South Africans in the next 100 days?
There's been multiple meetings of the G20 already. We've had the group mayors have come to the city. There's been the finance ministers. Multiple events have happened. And I haven't heard any outcry about the facilities or the way that they've managed that. However, like you said, there are serious concerns about what this is going to cost the city and whether or not the investment we're putting in now will actually pay off in long-term investment and the kind of blitzes we're seeing across the city now, that they are sustainable going forward. Yeah,
so let's get the views quickly just to establish us with our other viewers here. Mr. Mate, the G20 summit not just going to be seeing the leaders of these G20 countries and many others also in attendance, but very much a big contingent of the global business community also going to be watching very closely. Are we confidently going to say that South Africa, Johannesburg, Gauteng can represent us as a place to do business?
Good evening, Naledi. In fact, from a business point of view, we will hold a B20 summit about 2 or so days before the G20 Leaders Summit. We expect roughly 2,000 people to attend that summit. Of course, many will be South Africans, but quite a sizable number will come from various other countries. And so this just suggests that we really do need to get our ducks in a row. We will have visitors, and we need to make sure that we put our best foot forward so that the visitors leave our country with a very positive image. I mean, your studio guest has indicated that, yes, there have been various G20 working groups in different parts of the country, and they've gone on largely okay, no incidents there, but they're smaller in size. We will start to have very large gatherings around November. And this is where our infrastructure, our planning, our readiness will really be tested. And we would urge that in the remaining time, we really should pull all stops to make sure that we put a good show, because it is important to demonstrate that we're a country that is rebuilding, we're a country that is that has the wherewithal to run an event of this magnitude.
Yeah, Prof, I wonder if you hold the same view of, whether or not we can confidently say that we are already putting our best foot forward to get ourselves ready. Junior Kumalo, of course, today having covered a parliamentary oversight visit to the province today with various municipalities. And this is what really stood out, is that from Gauteng legislatures, 1 out of 80 members of legislature there for this particular moment. I mean, this is not something that we can obviously take quite lightly.
Naledi, I'm confident that with a concentrated effort, we can do it. I remind myself of several things that we've done in the past. Not only the first Rugby World Cup, but the first Soccer World Cup. And I can still remember all the doom and gloom that we had before that. The Commonwealth Games. There are several things that we've done that is huge. This one is a huge gathering. Just to give you some numbers, there are actually two major tracks, the financial track and the Sherpa track. And within each track, there are several meetings. And then, of course, like my colleague just said, the business G20 takes place, as well as about 11 others.
Yeah.
And therefore, we are using NASREC and things like that. So with a concentrated effort, we can do it. But like with all previous big events, I think the cost overruns is something that we'll have to discuss, because somebody will have to feed this bill.
Yeah, there's been a question around whether or not this bill is actually going to also see, return on investment for the city and for the country. And perhaps, Julia, you want to tackle that issue as well. Then we'll get into some of the infrastructure. My goodness, what is it that we heard from Panyaza Lesufi? 1,523 potholes have been repaired. The project now at 97% complete. Is that good enough? Again, our potholes reappear very quickly if you think about that as well.
Really, there was a lot of backlash against the mayor when he announced that most of the blitzes or cleanups would happen around the key routes, the kind of avenues and roads that they suspect these delegates are going to take. That's kind of shifted, and we're seeing a lot in, the war language of the bomb squad and the war rooms with these high-impact service delivery programs in multiple regions. We've seen a lot of work done in, side streets of suburban areas or around that. So there has been a bit more of a consolidated push. When it comes to who's footing the bill, it's a tricky one, because that really is supposed to fit within the actual budget of the city. These are supposed to be the general operations of things like JDA. Though, of course, there is an element of showing these delegates and these international communities, which come with a lot of aid money, investment money, and all sorts of things, what they could possibly put money into, being big infrastructure, being large-scale water projects and multiple other things. So it's not always necessarily bad if we're showing them, things that aren't fully polished.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to show them the things that they can really earn a reward from investing in and becoming part of.
And that's an interesting perspective, right? So don't polish it all up. Show some of the cracks so that there are opportunities to show. We're going to take some calls now as well from our viewers. How confident are you that Gauteng is confidently able to host the G20 Summit in just close to 100 days? Sifudi is calling in Randfontein. Sifudi, good evening to you.
Evening to you, Naledi, and your guest. How are you?
I'm well, Sifudi. Thank you so much for calling. Talk to us.
I hate this G20 issue, my dear. Because what constitutes Gauteng, it's not supposed to be Joburg. We've got a road here from Randfontein to Carletonville. That road started with potholes. It's now deteriorating. We're now traveling on top of the gravel, R559.
Yeah.
Now, the question that I must ask, were we supposed to wait for G20 in order to fix our infrastructure? It's like 2010, lady. Everything was in order. And post-2010 World Cup, everything deteriorated. So guess there, it's just been doctoring, and we don't have confidence in this. And foreigners, people who are coming for G20 cannot be prioritized over the indigenous people of this province. Good evening to you.
Good evening to you, Sifudi. Thank you so much. And it's a view that we've heard from so many who have said, this shouldn't just be about the delegates. What about the services that we want? We also want our roads and potholes fixed and traffic lights repaired and all of that. Let's take one more caller. Mulwanda is in Kempton Park. Mulwanda, good evening.
Good evening, Osman lady.
Good evening, Mulwanda. Thank you for calling that. Go ahead, Mulwanda.
Sorry, man. Sorry. Yes. Sorry for me for coughing. Pardon me.
Okay.
I think what is happening in the country, House Lady, it's indication that no, don't have leaders at all. We don't have leaders.
Why?
From the president, from the premier to the mayors. No, we can't. I mean, what kind of a country whereby you want to look clean because victors are coming? That not be G20, when this pothole road traffic that's going to be fixed. Because in that process, we are creating a loophole of corruption, we're creating a loophole of not quality job being done at all.
Yeah, okay. Sure, lots of frustration from our callers there. Molonto, thank you so much for calling. We're going to continue with this, and perhaps also Mr. Kulegani Mate of Business Unity South Africa talking to us about the budget here. It's at close to 1 billion rand that we're spending on this G20 summit. Are we going to see return on investment? And perhaps that will put some of the concerns of our viewers to rest. We'll continue after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Newsfeed PM, the late edition. We continue asking you at home if you are confident that Gauteng will be able to successfully host the G20 summit in close to 100 days. We're taking your calls on 010-594-6010 or send us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584. Let's see some of the messages that have come in from our viewers. Cindy says, is it true that potholes have been fixed? Where is that? Because we go through potholes daily around Midrand. Cindy not seeing some of those being fixed. And Mugete says, honestly, G20 comes at a time that South African societal problems are at a peak. The summit will happen anyway, whether we are ready or not. I just hope it will bear fruitful outcomes. I'm sure that's what you meant. Thank you so much for that. Ntab says, good evening, Naledi. I believe Johannesburg is ready. It's not like G20 leaders will be visiting our Johannesburg townships, which is where there's no service delivery. Inequality being raised there. Ntabs, thanks for that. Mwako from Botlokwa says, good evening, Naledi. Well, I really don't think they are ready or well prepared because service delivery is still a problem within the city of Johannesburg, especially proper roads, water, and I think it remains the biggest challenge. Marco, thank you so much for your contribution. We'll take more of those messages. But let's take another caller. Manis. Is it Manis in Pretoria? Manis, good evening.
Yes, good evening, Naledi.
Yes, thanks for calling.
Yes, my worry is that the council and government is concentrating on the roads and infrastructure that goes into Centre. What about the inner city of Johannesburg? Because it's dirty, it's decaying, it's stinking, it's filthy. Nothing is happening there. Well, what about foreigners? Illegal foreigners have taken it over. You know, they are doing as they please in the inner city there. Nothing is happening. When are you going to fix that as well?
There's a lot to fix. Manis, thank you so much for calling in. Let's bring it back to our panelists. And obviously lots of frustration from our viewers there, Kulegani. And, you know, Sifudi in Randfontein says, you know, our roads here in Randfontein, in our area needs attention. Someone sent a WhatsApp saying, well, I drive through Midrand, the potholes are all still there, so I don't know which ones are being fixed when the Premier says 97% of the work has been done. So which roads are they talking about? And just before the break there, the question was asked, we spend to get ready to host these delegates. Are we going to get return on investment that is going to benefit these people that are calling in and saying, I want to see improvement where I am?
Thanks, Naledi. And perhaps if I could comment on those. I mean, firstly, I think the frustrations that are expressed by the callers and viewers are valid because the conditions that you see in many of our townships, in the inner city and pretty much everywhere, are conditions that shouldn't exist. In fact, when Theo talked about the fact that we have in the past hosted these big events, World Cups, rugby, etc., it was slightly different because we had invested in building the infrastructure, yes, but we were not starting with the kind of backlog, the man-made backlog, if you like, where infrastructure that was there has been allowed to decay. We shouldn't be talking about potholes. We shouldn't be talking about things that we had fixed leading up to 2010. We should be talking about making improvements on top of that. So I think the frustrations are absolutely valid, and I hope that the leaders take those into account. It's also true that when you leave any sort of improvement project, infrastructure refurbishment too late, you then open opportunities for all manner of things to happen, for cost escalation, for potential corruption, etc. So all of those are valid, and I think we need to take them into account. What we shouldn't do is, after this is gone and everybody praises us for putting up a good show, to then take our foot off the pedal. We really should hold our leaders accountable, make sure that there is continuous improvement, there is extension of the infrastructure maintenance to areas that are unlikely to be reached during this period. Because that is what governing a city, that is what governing a province requires. You don't sit back and only wake up on the 11th hour before a major event. So all of these are valid, and I think we should, as residents of Gauteng and Johannesburg, make sure that the improvements made now are continued so that we do not fall back and make the mistake we made after 2010.
Yeah, because it's quite, Prof, and Prof Venter, I want to bring you in here. It's quite the messaging when you're hearing that the update is stormwater drain maintenance, for instance, on 443 drains is almost finished, when this should be ideally continuous work. I mean, there's a message that is being sent to the citizen here, and I wonder what you make of that. Repairs for 21,000 streetlights are well underway. Surely this should be ongoing work. Once again, there's a number here that stood out for me. So the installation of 11 kilometers of fencing, that's in the very early stages with only about 4% done. So that's quite low, and got a long way for that to go. But the frustrations that you hear from the residents that say, well, is this for us?
Yeah, I agree with Kulikani. The stuff that you're talking about is really about maintenance, which is some ongoing process which every local government should do. You haven't mentioned the amount of bridges that is basically in disrepair, and there's a few other things that we can add to the stuff. But, when you have a major event like this, and we're asking this financial question or economic question, will it pay off? I think South Africa is in a situation globally at the moment, either with our relationship with the United States or our position in the Global South or our position in BRICS, that we must actually take every opportunity that we have to get people here to see for themselves what's going on and what the opportunities are. And I think this is one such an opportunity. Currently, I'm not sure whether the Americans will arrive, whether President Trump will come with his huge entourage. They usually take one hotel for themselves. They don't share anything. So there will be a financial spin-off, despite the about 700 million that government is pumping into Gauteng infrastructure. And one must look at it carefully. The spin-off maybe next year, 2026. Remember, round about now, next year, we will be in a mindset of preparing for elections. Yeah. And if they do the work well now, it will provide an advantage next year. So I think one must take the broader view, and I totally agree with Kulikani that the moans from Randfontein, I actually traveled there today, and I can agree, between Krugersdorp, Randfontein, that area, it's not, I don't think that is a focus area of this job, but absolutely horrible.
Yeah, when you talk about our 2026, the mind frame of leaders and certainly the country is going to be on the upcoming elections. And these are local government elections, Julia, right? And then there's, I suppose, the sense of just how forward-thinking our leaders actually are in preparing for these things? That when we get closer to local government elections, do we say, okay, now let's make sure that the roads and the community is a little bit happy with the services because we need them to vote? Now with G20, have we acted quick enough to prepare for the summit? It was in March this year when the president, had an oversight visit to Gauteng, which I thought was interesting wording, right? The visit to Gauteng. And the president said, 1 or 2 meetings of the G20 I attended here were not very pleasing. We had to see the Premier Panyaza Lesufi apologizing to the president and saying, we'll get it right. Could that conversation have happened earlier?
In the previous package, you spoke about the financial mismanagement, and part of that is that the oversight of both province and the presidency and national government has really been lacking. So they haven't done their part in terms of making sure that the accounts and everything are in order and held people accountable for not doing that. But one thing the G20 has done is galvanize that spotlight on what the management is doing and what is actually happening in the city of Joburg. So we now have the presidential Joburg working groups, multiple working groups on things all the way across from infrastructure through to the inner city, of which my colleagues here are also part of as BUSA. And those have really opened up the doors and shone a light on what's happening behind the scenes in the city of Joburg.
Yeah.
And now that we've got that insight, now that we've got that collaboration, I think it's going to be very difficult to shut the door again and really not have that ongoing participation of civil society. And the groups on the ground, the community organizations who are the ones really cleaning the verges and filling the potholes and painting the street lines, they've been at the forefront of service delivery. And in a lot of cases, they're very glad to see, government taking some of the slack away in this period. They'll take what they can get.
Yeah.
And when you give government a deadline, when you tell them this is a milestone you've got to reach, we tend to see that activity and we'll take it. But if you look at certain instances, like for instance, we make a big song and dance about Ellis Park events when there's rugby there.
Yeah.
I went to the recent one against Australia, took the free train from Prasa. It's an amazing initiative. Park Station was looking incredible, really amazing camaraderie amongst people there. But as you're going from station to station and you see the decay around you, that can't be done with putting lipstick on a pig like we are now. That takes long-term systemic planning. And I think now that civil society, now that business, organized business are in the fray of really holding these people accountable and getting involved in what the changes are going to be, I think we're going to see a lot more progression going forward into local government elections.
Let me ask you this, Julia. Today we saw in Bedfordview, and I'm going to stay with you. Today we saw in Bedfordview, for instance, community members coming out and saying, we haven't had water in 2 weeks, right? So here we're talking about streetlights, potholes, what our visitors will see. For the most part, though, is there a concern that our service delivery frustrations will be out in full view, where communities are coming out and blocking roads and saying, well, this is all good and well, but we are angry. And that sends, quite the picture to the global community.
There are a lot of angry communities across the city of Joburg at the moment. We've got communities in Westville and Coronationville, Westbury and Coronationville in the streets already. We've got communities in Kensington who haven't had water in weeks. Areas around the commando system, large portions of the West Rand, and Sandton didn't have water for 4 days last week. This is where we're expecting most of these visitors to be. And water is something that try and get a hotel owner to explain to people, you can't shower. That's most probably the worst indictment that we could get as a city. And that kind of pressure, when the city is buying a large amount of bulk water, paying all of this to Rand Water, and then only being paid 45% of that because of all the leaks and illegal connections and multiple other non-revenue water things, that's why we're not getting investment in our core infrastructure, because they just don't have the money. And when there's no systemic push to really do something about the aging infrastructure, that's when you're going to get frustration. That's when people are going to hit the streets. And when you're giving them platitudes and making promises that you're not delivering, they're going to get angrier and angrier. And I think the time is running out for that kind of leeway that government has. So if it doesn't kick off with the G20, I wouldn't be surprised if it kicks off very soon afterwards.
Yeah, Prof. Venter, I want to give that one to you as well. protests over basic services, water, electricity, and as Julia says, especially water, trying to explain to delegates that they can't take a shower. I mean, sheesh, what a conversation. But if you are concerned that we will see communities come out and say, well, in this area, we haven't had water for so long, and just, how that looks to the international community. Prof. Venter?
Yeah, firstly, let me just respond to the previous input. We must remember the G20, several countries, including the European Union as such, they are forward thinking, and I can imagine that most of them already decided where they're going to stay and so on, and they're in discussions, because this is typically what businesses do and what governments do, in discussion with those local hotels to make sure that there's ample water, that there's water reservoirs additionally, and so on and so on. So the visitors to the G20, I think, will be well catered for. Therefore, my heart goes out to those guys in the townships, because they are not part of the focus at the moment. And I think if there's something that Lesufi and Dada Morero can do in these times, is to pay a little bit more attention to those things on the periphery of the preparations, to show that there is feeling for these kind of things. Because I think the governments coming in, they're well catered for. I don't even worry about them. It doesn't matter in which hotel or motel or whatever place they're going to stay, they will be catered for. But this is a good opportunity to do those things that neither of the coalition governments in Johannesburg did over the last 3 or 4 years. And this is a good time to start doing it.
Yeah, Mr. Mate, I'm keen to hear your view on the same question. What that does for, an investor who's looking at Gauteng, for instance, and looking to do business with us, and then sees communities that are protesting over basic services, if that's a worry.
Yeah, I'm also with Theo here that I think that the areas that will be occupied, used, frequented by the visitors will be largely catered for. I don't expect there to be problems. This is really a question about how we use this opportunity to fix what have been our problems about the management and the governance of our cities. Julia is right about what is currently happening, the initiative, the presidential working groups, and we need to make sure that those continue beyond the G20, so that the improvements that need to be made are undertaken, and undertaken for all of the citizens of Johannesburg, because that's what we want. We want a city that works, a city that functions for everybody. And yes, we do want to make sure that visitors see something appealing to them that says, this is a city where you can live. You can come and set up shop here and live. You're not going to have to put up with inconvenience. That is also important. And I believe that part of the refurbishment, maintenance, and so on is intended to do that. So the question you asked earlier on, will we see return on investment?
Yeah.
Yes, because return on investment takes different forms. It's immediate, but it's also in the medium to long term.
Okay, I'm going to put you guys on the spot because this is not closing thoughts, and I'll actually go work backwards again. Mr. Mate, your final thoughts, and I'll say, if you had the ear of, let's say, Panyaza Lesufi on what he needs to prioritize, 3 things that he needs to get right in the next 100 days, what would those be?
I would say that he needs to make sure that the city works. So get basic things like just the traffic lights to work. There's nothing as frustrating as being stuck in traffic lights that don't work. And those things just leave bad impression with visitors. And of course, attend to potholes and all of those other things. But we should not do this at the expense of our citizens, of the residents of Gauteng. They should also feel that this government cares for us. It's not just about getting things ready for the G20, because that would amount to putting lipstick on a pig, as Delia was saying.
Okay, that term again. Okay, Prof. Venter, 3 priorities.
Yeah, I would say number 1, make sure about your substations and your electricity, because if that fails, then there's a huge problem. And the second one, I would add bulk water supply. Make sure a concentrated effort. And then lastly, I must agree with Kulikani that even if it's only symbolic, but contribute to those areas adjacent to the main focus, because otherwise you're just going to create more frustration and not less frustration.
Okay. Julia?
Communities and informal settlements did have the opportunity to be part of this program. The people in Kliptown, UNESCO heritage site, that square where the Freedom Charter was written, was supposed to be on the list. But the investment from the heritage portfolio never actually has materialized. There's nothing there to see. And that should be a massive wake-up call for the city government and for national government as to how money is being spent here. So really take an effort to really hold on to our heritage sites and the things that matter. But in the next 100 days, it starts with, like they said, making sure that bulk supply is available, making sure the basic services are available. But it also, the start of urban decay starts with a fall down of basic bylaw enforcement. We need a bylaw enforcement blitz to make sure that the policies that are good and large in the city of Joburg are enforced, and therefore things like illegal dumping, the vandalism of our infrastructure and other things is abated.
Yeah, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. We hope that our leaders have been listening to the discussion, certainly. And of course, we watch as we get closer and closer to hosting the G20 Summit. Thank you so much to Prof. Theo Venter, governance expert, to Mr. Kuligani Mate of Business Unity South Africa, and Julia Fish of Joburg Can. We take a short break. More news on the other side. Welcome back. So let's take a look at just a few text messages from our viewers on the discussion we had just before the break. Of course, that being the confidence that we have in Gauteng being able to host the G20 Summit. Let's bring some of those up on the screen now. Goodness says, no, Gauteng is not ready at all. We will be embarrassed. The whole CBD stinks of urine. How I wish there can be a law that charges any male spotted relieving themselves in public. Suggestion maybe for public toilets to be all over because it's bad. Goodness, thank you for that. Mangani King says, so initially we must wait for another prestigious event for the ANC government to be active. I'm sure the service delivery will only be around the north where this G20 will take place.